Hernán Cortes de Monroy Pizarro Altamirano, Marquis of the Valle of Oaxaca, was born in 1845 in the western Spanish town of Medellin. His parents were Martin Cortes de Monroy and Catalina Pizarro Altamirano. Being born with a slight incline of nobility from his father, he was also second cousins with Franco Pizarro, who later conquered Peru, although he is not to be confused with Franco Pizarro that helped him in this Aztec conflict right now. A frail boy who often got sick, he was sent to study Latin with an uncle in Salamanca, but came back 2 years later to the disappointment of his parents. But these studies, which gave him the knowledge of Castilian legal codes, accompanied by his training for a noble, justified his unexpected application for the conquest of the New World. He was held back for a year due to an injury, where he took the opportunity to explore Spain before departing for Hispaniola. Cortes inhabited a ship commanded by Alonso Quintaro, a manipulative man who wanted to trick the higher-ups in order to reach the New World faster. This sent a message to Hernan as he continued these actions during his conquest of the Aztecs. He arrived in San Domingo when he was 18 years old in 1804, where he was granted citizenship and the ability to set up a farm. He was given notoriety where he was given laborers, and for the next 5 years he established himself in the colony. Cortes took part of the conquest of Hispaniola and Cuba in 1506. Cortes accompanied Diego Velázquez de Solís, who became the governor of New Spain in 1511. Cortes was twice appointed in the municipal magistrate of Santiago due to his efforts in the colonization of Cuba. Hernan was then therefore made treasurer who answered to the crown, and gave a good impression of Velázquez, where he promoted the aspiring colonist as his secretary, and gave him a position of power he would use later. Later, the year was 1814, and relationship between the two colonists were strained. This was due to the arrivals from other Spanish colonists beginning their journey to explore the mainland of North America. Cortes was made captain general of a new expedition in 1518, where he gathered a large group comprised of 6 ships and 300 men. In order to re-establish his relationship with Velázquez, he married the governor's sister-in-law, Catalina Juárez, in hopes that it would improve. However, in 1518, Velázquez put Cortes in charge of an expedition that would change the course of Spanish history. Its intent was to explore and secure the interior for colonization, but they had a disagreement which made the government revoke his charter. Cortes ignored these notions and immediately left anyways in February 1519. He briefly stopped in Cuba in order to gain more men and supplies, where then he headed for the mainland. The man reached the Yucatan Peninsula, which was controlled by the Mayans at that time, and the Aztecs. There, after meeting a survivor from a shipwreck and scuffles with the natives, he received a compensation of 20 native women and converted them to Christianity. One of them later became the mother of his first son. He claimed these lands in the name of the crown, and using the survivor who spoke native languages, was able to communicate with the Aztecs. And on Easter Sunday 1519, in San Juan de Ulloa, Cortes met 2 important members of the Aztec society, Moctezuma's Aztec Empire governors Tendile and Pipatalque, swiftly taking over the now Mexican state of Veracruz in July of that same year. He directly dismissed the authority of Cuba and answered only to the Spanish monarchy. His focus now was the interior and reaching the capital of this obscure empire. In Veracruz, he tried to convince some of the tribes controlled by the Aztecs to summon Moctezuma II, where he was denied, but he was still determined to reach his goal. 100 men stayed while he marched to Tenochtitlan in August 1519. On his way, he allied with various native groups that resented Aztec dominance in the region. By November 1519, Hernan amassed a large army where he arrived at the capital, where he was warmly received by the emperor of the Aztecs, although this was a plan made by Moctezuma to see the weaknesses the Spanish contained. He gave the newcomers gifts such as gold and silver to give them a false sense of security, but all that did was convince the Spanish that they had a plethora of riches. After learning his men would kill on the coast, they took Moctezuma hostage and established himself as the emperor ruler of the empire. Velázquez, not wanting to be outdone by Cortes, sent another expedition to directly oppose him. Overcoming it, he assimilated the extra men into his army, and he speedily returned to the capital, where the emperor was killed. Facing an angry population, Cortes fled, where most of the Lulu treasure was lost. Their pathway to their intended destination was rough, but they managed to reach Tacala, and with reinforcements, cut off the Aztec capital with their allied cities, beginning a policy of attrition. After one final attack, the Aztec Empire fell when Hernan took Tenochtitlan in 1521. He renamed it Mexico City, thus fully claiming it for the Spanish throne. Many believe that Cortes was unjustly treated by the crown, or he gained little reward for establishing an entire colony. Even though he was appointed governor by King Charles, 4 other royal assistants were brought to monitor his movements. This, however, did not deter Cortes from establishing his own institutions. He began to reconstruct Mexico City in addition to founding other cities across the conquered lands. He also set up an encomendada system. His wife Catalina arrived in Mexico in 1522, where the marriage was loveless and childless. Cortes' only male heir was a mixed race, and he named it Martin Cortes. He was surrounded in controversy when his wife died mysteriously in 1522, but it gave him the opportunity to marry in a high-status section. He also wanted to convert the native groups towards Christianity, so he sent a request to send religious preachers to the New World. He was surrounded by his rivals and enemies from within the kingdom, but ultimately had the backing of the king to ensure his safety. In 1529, he was given the coat of arms along with various other royal awards. However, Velazquez became a pest in Cortes' eyes, threatening his place for power. This conflict further separated the trust between the monarchy and Cortes, and after many changes in the local government, he was exiled to Spain in 1528. He returned to Mexico after settling agreements with King Charles, before being distinguished as a noble. Marquis of the Valley of Oaxaca was given his noble name in 1529. But later that year, he married noblewoman Doña Juana de Zuniga. She later gave birth to 3 children. The legitimate son was also named Martin and was heir to the nobility. This new nobility returned to Mexico in 1530. Still, he had diminished military authority, but the newly established colony was in a state of anarchy due to neglect. Suspicious this was intentional, Cortes was charged. This badly decreased his popularity with the people, and no report was made. After somewhat establishing his power once again, he retired to the estates south of Mexico City, where he constructed his palace and Pacific exploration. He ruled until 1541, where he disputed the right to explore what is now southwestern United States. He returned to Spain, where he was confronted by angry civilians and numerous lawsuits, now being heavily in debt and ignored by the monarchy. He was disgusted and returned to Mexico, where he lived his final days before dying in 1547 at the age of 62. Hernan Cortes can be directly attributed to colonization of North America. His normal beginnings, which was later accompanied by his life of tricks and lack of trust in his teenage years, showed him that he had to be cunning in order to achieve success. His ruthless takeover of the Aztec Empire showed the fruits of these actions, and for the first time, Spain achieved a permanent colony along with the abundant amount of riches gained by the native groups. Without Cortes leading the way, Spain would not have become a great power in European politics in that time period. Cortes established extractive institutions that sucked the wealth of the land, accompanied by the usage of native slaves, which made the Spanish Empire extremely wealthy. His rapid success led to becoming nobility, yet he was monitored by the crown. This also shows how the Spanish monarchy's ignorance to his colonists, as Cortes was constantly harassed and accused. Cortes' legacy rose to the eventual Mexican War of Independence in 1816. However, these institutions that he helped create still has a negative impact on the country today, as it is very corrupt and divided. And finally, these are the pictures of the ship I made that were kind of sort of resembled the ships from Spain, Spanish ships in the 1500s. And yeah, that's it.